We spend a lot of time talking about productivity, leadership, and workplace culture. But behind every employee is a life outside work, and for many, that includes parenting, caregiving, and family responsibilities. Our today's guests have spent years working at the intersection of family well being, workplace well being, and leadership. Through her work with Win Win Parenting, she helps organizations better support working parents while also helping families navigate the challenges of a rapidly changing world. I'm delighted to welcome Dr. Rosina to the show. For our listeners who may be discovering your work for the first time, could you please tell us a little bit about your journey and the work you're doing through Win Win Parenting?
Love to. So, the work into win win parenting came from many angles, if I'm honest. It came from my personal journey, becoming a working parent. It became through my profession, and I'll tell you a bit about that. But more recently, it's really come about by the worldwide data that shows that working parents are really suffering. So let me go back to the beginning. I now have an almost 19-year-old, but many years ago, when I first became a mother and I was trying to navigate work and family life, I realized that we get education for every profession except for parenting. We don't get that. We don't get the research understanding. So I was a researcher at the University of Sydney when I finished up before I started Win Win Parenting. And I have a education focused PhD and a Masters of Higher Education. So I was working in the business school and I was doing a sabbatical at the University of San Diego in the US. Anyway, I had a group of 9 PhD students. And so the topic that we chose, that I was teaching them how to be PhD students, we chose managing work and family life, employee and family well-being. That was the topic. And that was many years ago. That was before, at the time when well-being programs were just starting. So that was around 2012, many years ago. And what we realized, the students and myself, was that that corporates were starting to understand that you bring your whole self to work. You can't just leave whatever's going on at home and then come to work like a robot, do your work, and then, go home and deal. So it was good to see that organizations were saying, okay, we need to look after individual well-being. But what they weren't considering with the programs was that you can't say to a busy working parent, why don't you just take some time off and go to the gym or go and meditate? Or go and, when you've got a 2-year-old hanging off your leg or you've got a teenager who's going through bullying, you can't use those programs. And that's when Win-Win Parenting was born. I was like, it's a big hole in the market. Working parents need support. There's no programs to support them in the corporate world. So I started Win-Win Parenting and the slogan was good for working parents and good for business.
That's right. You often say that working parent burnout is not simply a well-being issue but a workplace issue. Since the corporates are now realizing that the biggest pressures facing working parents today is at the workplace. Because what exactly is the mental load of parenting and how does it show up in the workplace?
It's a really good question that you ask. So, until recently, really recently, not many years ago, we would say work life is work life, family life is family life. Working parents, what they're doing outside work is the individual's problem. They need to get organized, they need to take care of their kids, and they just need to show up to work and just do their job. But what we realize is that actually it's not an individual problem. We know that it is not about an individual being disorganized or lacking commitment. In fact, working parents are required, like we've got a system today where most families are required to have both parents working. And so it's not the same system. When we set up work and family life many, many years ago, it was very common for there to be a stay-at-home parent and a breadwinner parent. So that worked very well, right? There's someone who's doing this, there's someone who's doing that. But in today's modern world, we know, number one, many families can't afford that. There's just not even an option. They can't live without two
Right.
wages. The second thing is that many mothers, don't want to stay at home. They want to contribute to the world and they want to be mums. They want to have it all, right? So we've got that sort of situation. And so what we've got now is parents, working parents being put into an impossible situation where if they don't work, they're financially destitute. If they don't work, they don't get to contribute to the world and be out in the world and, make the difference they want to do. But they're expected to work like they don't have a family and expected to raise a family like they don't work. So that is why it's a social, it's a societal issue. It's a workplace issue. It's not an individual issue. It's much bigger than that.
Right, because that's why I guess they say that it takes a village to raise a child. And speaking of, I have closely worked with women who are like highly ambitious and at a very good designation. But the major focus, I know if it's at work, then they are feeling sad because they're not able to give time to their children. And it just breaks them. It is so hurtful for them. And do you think that organization underestimate how much family stress impacts the employee performance?
Yes, I do. I absolutely do. And I think that is why we're at the breaking point now. I'm going to go to a personal story for myself. So I had our child, I was later in life. I was 43. So I was kind of at the peak of my career. I was an associate professor. I'd won 5 teaching awards, 5 best paper awards. I was like, I got this. I've proven myself academically, So when I had our child, I was ready, I was at the height of my career. So I went away 12 months and then I came back to work. And I remember during the leave, I made a calendar of every month I took a photo of our son. And so I thought that's going to be nice for me. When I come back, I'll have a calendar. I'll be able to look at him. It'll be all fine. Well, the first day I sat there just crying my eyes out, flicking the calendar, thinking, what am I doing? Why am I here? So I knew I had so much to give the world with my knowledge and what I wanted to do in the world to help students, to, write my research. But I had a little boy at home who also needed me. So I felt very torn. And that's what's happening, especially for mums who take the bigger load of childcare and they take on the workplace. And that is why while the burnout statistics, if you look at working parents and non-parents, the burnout statistics, mental health challenges are much higher for working parents. It makes sense. I mean, that's not rocket science, is it? If you're looking after a family and you're working full time, you're probably going to be tired, more tired than someone who doesn't have caring responsibilities, right? Who comes home, grabs a glass of wine, sits down and relaxes for the evening, right? So that's a no-brainer. But if you don't segment the data even further to women, when you look at mums versus dads, the mums are even more burned out than the dads, the mothers and fathers, because mothers generally tend to take the larger share of childcare and while they're working. So it's a big problem to be able to contribute in the world, to run a family. But if we don't have working parents, let's face it, Robbie, there's no future. Working parents contribute to the economy. And
Right.
we know that about 40% of the workforce are working parents. So you can't just take them out. It'd be economically unviable. And, those people have to make a living to be able to raise their children. And then if it's not for them, there's no future of society. If we don't, who's going to be the future doctor, the future baker, the future builder if we don't keep parenting and having, new children?
Right. Because now that corporate bringing diversity culture, women employees are more preferred at the workplace, more in the operations domain, if I may say. Now, I would like to pivot to the leadership and the organizational responsibility. When you started Win-Win Parenting, did you imagine that you'd eventually be having conversation with HR leaders, CEOs, and organization about workplace well-being and physio psychosocial safety, or did you that evolution happen naturally through your work with families?
So when I started Win-Win Parenting, that was for the corporate space straight away to work with leaders. I was working at the time in the business school at the University of Sydney, and my area was gender equality, workplace wellbeing, education. Those were my topics of research. So when I saw this big hole right alongside working at the university, I just started Win-Win to see, are there organizations that are going to support working parents? Are there interests in wellbeing programs that are tailored specifically for the challenges of working parents versus general mental health, general physical wellbeing, general financial wellbeing? As you can imagine, they're very different when you're talking about those different groups. So I started straight away talking to HR leaders, wellbeing leaders. More so nowadays, of course, we're talking about workplace health and safety leaders who are looking at psychosocial safety. And we know that we've got those workplace laws now that say we need to look at what is the work family conflict? What is a fair workload? What is a workload that's inclusive? Like just simple things like if you set a meeting at 8 o'clock in the morning or 3 o'clock in the afternoon, when it's drop off and pick up time, that's not inclusive for a working
Mm.
parent. What are they meant to do? Bring their child to the meeting or, what are they meant to do? So, and what happens if, for example, a child is sick one day? So, for example, I was having a meeting this morning with one of my colleagues in Canada, and at 3 o'clock this morning, I get a cancellation. Not that I knew when I got up at 6 o'clock, I knew because her child was ill and she had to take them to the doctor. Of course, I'm going to understand that. That is going to happen. There's nothing that can be done about that. So, yes, it was always to work with HR leaders to help them really understand, especially if they are not parents, what are the many challenges and how do we create a corporate environment that is family friendly? Because we actually know from research that working parents are ambitious. They don't want to be excluded. They want to be included. They are masters at being able to navigate work family conflict and juggle a lot of balls. So they are great for leadership positions.
I agree. I have worked with leaders. In fact, there are respective leaders' granddaughters were graduating, and they were still high on energy and managing the group of and team of 500 people. It was quite inspiring to see because with so much of experience and wisdom, with so much of knowledge, it was sure that team is was heading in the right direction. And if you were advising a CEO tomorrow morning, what is that one change you would recommend immediately?
It's hard, to be honest with you, to say one change, Robbie, if you don't mind me saying. If I was going to say one thing, it would be to have open communication, obviously, open and non judgmental communication. Find out what's going on with the working parents. But the reason why I don't say just one thing is we created a 5-step process for leaders to really help them understand and then mitigate the risks. Because if we don't measure, if we don't check, we can't mitigate. You know how they say if you're on a fitness program, you track your steps, you track what you're eating, you track. Why? Because then what gets measured gets managed, right? And it's the same thing. So do you mind if I go through the 5 steps? Would that be all right?
Please, please.
All right, excellent. So the first thing is to collect data. When we have well-being surveys, most of the time it's so general that you don't find out what the work family conflicts are. If you don't ask specific questions like what are the challenges you're experiencing with your children, your childcare, your work family conflict, if you're not asking those questions, you're not going to get data on that, right? So the first thing is to really create opportunities for anonymous feedback, for interviews, for surveys that actually look from the lens of a working parent to gather the data from a working parent. And oftentimes, organizations leaders will say to me, no, but that's privacy laws will not allow you to do that. You can't ask questions like that. And that's not actually true. The privacy laws, if it is set up in a way that says we are asking you these questions to identify the psychosocial risks so that we can mitigate them, you can answer them anonymously. We will be very careful with your data. You can participate or not participate, right? So if you set it up in a way that is safe, of course, working parents are going to go, yes, I need to tell you, I've got childcare problems. Right? I've got workload problems. I've got colleagues who are not pulling their weight. I've got criticism from colleagues who don't have children. If you've got that opportunity to share, then you've got the opportunity to do the next step. So the first thing is get the data, find out what's going on. The second step is to train leaders. We cannot expect that leaders are going to be able to manage the complexities of being a working parent, having many working parents in the organization and supporting them if they themselves do not have children, if they themselves do not have caring responsibilities. We all know what it's like, anyone who's become a parent. Others go, "Oh, you can only understand when you are a mother, when you are a father, and when you don't have children, you're like, oh, sure, you just don't believe it." And then the baby comes home and you're like, "Now I understand exactly what it's like," right? So helping leaders, number 1, understand the many risks, but number 2, giving them resources, giving them capacity and training to have those conversations to be able to support their leaders. Are you happy for me to continue or would you prefer to have a little break here?
No, no. If you want, yeah.
Okay, so the next thing is collect the data, train the leaders. The next thing is, well, now that you've got the data and you've got leaders who are ready to support, now you need the targeted programs. So what we know is that the biggest risks that working parents have is work-family conflict. So having reasonable workloads and flexibility as to when they complete their work. The next thing is their children's mental health is a huge workplace, is a huge stress at home that can come into the workplace. We know that many children are now neurodiverse, so they have learning difficulties. We've got parents who have got kids who are being bullied, parents who have got kids who won't eat anything, anything that's not white or, what I mean? So they're worried about that. So when you start to unpack the daily challenges, kids that don't want to go to school, do you know what I mean? So you can target the program specifically around, if you've got a general nutrition program, if you're a working parent, that's not very helpful to you because kids don't generally eat all of those things that we say, 5 vegetables a day, and kids are like, yuck. So we have to have correct programs, right, for working parents. So have the programs. The next step, the fourth step, is what I call a genuinely family-friendly workplace culture. In other words, you can have all the policies, procedures, flexibility, support, but if working parents feels like they're going to be disadvantaged or they're going to be criticized or they're going to be seen less than because they took the flexibility or they took the course or they, asked for the leave, right? Then it's not a truly family friendly workplace. It looks like it. You tick all the boxes, but working parents are not genuinely benefiting from it. And the fifth part, the last part of this process is, well, measure. You've collected the data, you've provided the training, you've provided for leaders and for working parents. You've got this family-friendly workplace culture. So what's the difference now? Have you got working parents who feel more engaged? Have you got working parents who feel less burnt out? Have you got working parents who are turning up, not taking more days off, but actually coming in engaged? Have you got working parents that are less burnt out? Have you got working parents that say, I love working here. I'm loyal because my organization helps me do well at home and well at work. So that's the 5 steps that I would recommend to any leader. And of course, you don't do it in one go. You do it step by step and make the difference.
I totally agree because one solution is not gonna help because the problem is big because it involves children's also. Many organizations talk about supporting working parents. I was fortunate enough to work in a company where there were on-site childcare facilities and childcare partnership. In fact, in there next to recreational area in our office building, there is a daycare where when they logged in, they send their children, most of the parents, and at the end of the day, they pick them up and take back home. I understand that eventually I learned that Australia has taken stronger stance on social media access for children. And that,
Yes, they have.
yeah, because the impact is very much high. If they are able to access to this quick dopamine access, they're not active enough and they are like into the phone all the time. And I believe that we are at risk of repeating the same mistakes by adopting AI too quickly before fully understanding its a long-term impact, especially on children's learning and development and well-being. So in that case, now the parents are busy and to make them eat or to make them do things, they just give them the phone. So, what skills do you believe children will need in this kind of environment? How can
I love the
parents
2
help them?
points that you made. I love the 2 points that you made, and I think I'll start with the first one, which was that whole concept of having a childcare partnership or a childcare facility on site. Can you imagine any working parent that would not think that's a good idea? You cannot, right? It's
Yeah.
just such a great support to be able to know that, you're going to work, you've got a place, even if it was only emergency childcare, that you've got other options, but in emergencies, you can take them here. So that's absolutely brilliant. So I do want to, stop on that. The other thing that we can talk about later if you'd like to, and that's parental leave. We've had some changes as well in Australia on parental leave. But going back to your question about technology, the Australian government very recently, in the 10th of December last year, banned social media for any child under 16. And there was very sound research that brought that ban about. We know that children who spend a long time on social media, we've got to remember that those are the very formative years when they're looking for who am I in the world? So they're looking at influences, they're looking at what other people are saying, they're looking at what other people are doing. So instead of looking inward and becoming the person they can become, they can have very negative influences from outside. And what we found was that children, the more time they spent on social media, the more mental health challenges, depression, anxiety, all of those things were well documented. So the Australian government just bit the bullet and said, that's it. No
Right.
more. Anyone under 16 is not accessing. And we're relying on parents and we're relying on social media organizations to kick them off. But we know that that will have a huge impact on their well-being. Moving right along with AI, I think we've got the same problem. Many parents didn't have that technology when they were growing up, and they were only coming to terms with social media themselves and all this gaming. And so many parents just don't have the hours or the knowledge or the expertise to understand what is harmful, what is okay, how long, what's acceptable, what are the rules, how can we protect them? So that's why in our programs we do a lot on technology and children to show. What we do is we have a course where we say, these are the harms and this is how you can prevent it. And these are the harms and this is how you can prevent it. And now we've moved right into AI. And of course, as you mentioned, it impacts every area of a child, their development. Now, particularly, let's just look at learning. So in my day, I had to go to a library. I had to look in the catalogue. I had to go and find the book, then I had to read the book, and then I had to write the essay, usually handwritten, and someone would type it up for me, okay? So can you imagine the cognitive functions that had to happen for all of that to happen? So instead of an internet that will sift through the references, I had to find the ones that were relevant. Instead of an internet summarizing it, I had to summarize it all. Instead of a AI telling me what the main points were, I had to figure out what the main points were. Now, fast forward to today, of course I use AI. Of course I use the internet. Of course I use all of that. But my ability to identify good information, integrate good information, analyze good information, then present good information happened outside this. So there was already this skill, and then you use the AI that looked at 3 different groups of students. One group had to write an essay just from their brain. No references, no nothing. So they got an essay question, write the answer. The second group were able to use internet searches. So they're allowed to go to an internet browser, go and get references, and then use that information to create an essay. The third group were allowed to ask AI to answer the essay and to do it for them. Now, all the while, they were having their brain scanned to see what was happening. And I don't think you need to be a neuroscientist to imagine what the outcome was, right? So obviously, the one that did the whole essay in their brain had every aspect of their brain lighting up as they were doing it. The next group that were just doing internet searches but still had to integrate it themselves had the next amount. And then the last one, hardly anything lit up, right? So in other words, they got the information. But what happened next was interesting. So after the essay was written, either by yourself with references or with none, they started to ask recall questions and ownership of the work. And of course, the recall was absolutely the best. I think I've got these numbers that 83% of the Chat GBT group, because that was what they were using, could not quote from their own essay. And only 11% in the search engine one couldn't. Whereas obviously the ones who had written it all themselves were, of course, all able to quote exactly what well, not exactly, but they could quote what they'd learned, right? So you betcha it's changing the way we learn, the way we think, and that's something we have to be very, very careful about. So I'm not against AI, and I would recommend that a child sits down and plans their essays, thinks about it all offline and sets it all out, does the thinking, does the questioning, then goes and gets the references, writes it all out. And then there's no reason why you can't get AI to have a look and give you some feedback, not to do it for you, but to say, where are your references? Did you think about this point? Right? So that would be a good way to help students. But you're absolutely right. This is a very potentially dangerous where we're not going to help our children develop cognitively.
I agree because I believe that even if I'm adapting AI too quickly before fully understanding its long term impact on children's learning and development, like you gave in an example on essay writing, who write their own essays are far more knowledgeable and than those who let AI write. Because even I am from the generation where we do have to do our own research, go to library, and it gives so much confidence in the work because we have done it from end to end, and decision making skill is developed, confidence is developed, and there is faith in the work we do. And that helps me in my current work because I'm confident that the work I'm doing, will be approved by the leadership and the regulators as such. It does help. And I believe there should be a line between using an AI tool for learning and allowing it to do thinking for us.
Yeah, and I think you're exactly right. If, for example, a child uses AI to learn, so let's say they have a new maths problem or a new assignment or whatever, and they don't know how to do it, and they say, could you give me step-by-step instructions on how to do trigonometry or how to do, this particular report, what it should look like? That's terrific. And then you go away and you go, I looked at that, and then you go and do 3 or 4 or 10 questions yourself You go, "That's great. I've got the knowledge." But if you go in there and say, "Here's my questions, answer them for me," and then I hand it in, when you sit for an examination, you're gonna know nothing, right? So I agree with you. I think there are definitely advantages of having AI if it's used correctly, and if it's used discerning. Like, one of the things that we have to teach our children, well, many, many skills. So the whole idea is to say, have you fact checked that? Have you looked and saw what is the source? Does that even make sense? Because we do know that sometimes we get information from AI that is, yeah, yeah, not AI at all, right? And it's only when we've got that critical thinking that we go, is that logical? Does that even make any sense? How does that compare to something else? Have I checked a second source, right? To compare
Right.
whether it's the truth or not. So whenever, our son comes to us with some fact or knowledge, I always say, what was
Uh,
the source of that? And did you get a second source? Because we want our kids to think critically, not to just accept information at face value. And that is particularly harmful when we're talking about AI if we're using it in the way that we've been talking about that the kids might use it.
Yes. I remember when I first got access to internet and whatever I used to search on WebMD, I used to link my diagnosis to it and I used to feel that I'm going to die tomorrow because the answers were so generic in nature. It is later in life I realized I learned discerning and understanding the reliable source of it and rather than just relying because that is why the world is heading, I believe, the content consumption and the advertising, the fake advertising most importantly, and people are buying things late at night is because they're vulnerable and they are just believing everything.
Absolutely. And this is where bringing it back to, the workplace and leadership and back to working parents. If you've got children who are at school and learning, if you've got kids who are on social media, if you've got kids who are doing, shooter gaming, aggressive gaming, these are all challenges that you have to deal with on a daily basis. And the question is, have you got the information? Have you got the ability to do that? And that's where when organizations put into place reliable resources, ones that working parents go, phew, I don't have to look for it. I know that this is research based, evidence based. I know that this will give me good guidance. So instead of trying to spend hours trying to find what I should be doing, I just use that information and sort it out. And oftentimes I find, I've been working with parents now for, nearly 2 decades. And it's actually I don't even if I can't solve the problem, if I know the next step, if I know what I'm doing, if I'll eventually get there. So, for example, if my child is being bullied and I know that the steps are this, 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 and this, even though I haven't solved it right now, I can feel calmer because I know what the next step is. I know what I'm going to do. I can help my child. I'm not helpless. So these are things that we need to think about when we're trying to help our working parents succeed at home so that they can come to work feeling confident, effective, ready to go, and loyal because their organization is looking after them. That's huge, right?
Yeah, that's assuring actually. I see when people are leaving their children in the daycare and they are like they come on time, they leave on time, they meet their children because there is this relief that the children are safe and obviously there are their friends' children also in the same facility. You have worked across different countries and in India, the parenting often make enormous uh, parents often make enormous sacrifices for their children' education and career. Do you think that we sometimes focus so much on achievement that we are overlooking well-being and life skills?
100%. So the answer to that is yes, a resounding yes. I've just come back from the US. I did a keynote speech called Have We Missed the Mark? Raising the Next Generation and Giving Them Life Skills for Life. So that was the actual keynote address that I was giving at the Fathers and Families Coalition of America. Because if any parent stopped for a moment and please don't get me wrong. I love learning and academics. That is my passion, like, so please don't think I'm putting academics aside. It's important. I've got, 4 degrees of my own and many other courses that I've completed, and I will keep doing them. So learning is fundamental and important. But right alongside that, that would be like saying we only have to eat, but we don't need to drink water. And we know that that's not true. So having academics is great, but where's the water? We want to make sure the water's there as well, right? Which is the life skills. Now, anybody that sits down in one moment and actually reflects on their life and says, what was it that got me through my life? What was it? What was it about me? How did I succeed in the world? Well, this was a question that I asked myself when our son was born. And being a parent who was an educator, so I knew the academics, no problems, I got this, good. But what was all the life skills he was going to need to be a successful, happy, healthy human? And the first one that I came up, so I created a life skills ebook series with 7 different life skills areas. And the first one for me was personal power. And that doesn't mean in the sense of my power over you or anything like that. No, it's my self-esteem, my belief in myself, my resilience, my being able to manage my own emotions. That's about my personal power. So when something goes wrong, I pick myself up and I keep going. When someone makes me feel like I doubt myself, I go, no, I'm not going to doubt myself. I'm going to have faith that, all right, I don't know it now, but if I keep going, I will know it. So that was the first area that I thought everything in life comes from your belief in yourself. Your ability to regulate your emotions, your ability to be resilient, your ability not to give up. The next area that was I thought was an important skill was to do with health and well-being. I feel like many people go through life and actually don't understand the basics, like what is a macronutrient? What is a micronutrient? How much water do you need? How much sleep do you need? How much exercise do you need? What does a whole food look like? What is a good diet for a child and an adolescent? And then so for me, health and well-being, and those are skills that are huge. Sleeping, eating, exercise, making sure you've got a healthy body. So I feel good about myself. I've got a healthy body. The next area that was for me was communication and relationships, because we are not islands. We thrive, we live in a family, in a community, at a workplace, in a school, in a preschool. So how do I communicate? How do I make friends? How do I work collaboratively? How do I be a good family member? What does it mean to be a respectful child, a respectful sibling, a caring, that sort of thing. The next one, of course, I couldn't leave out education, career, and money. That's the next one. So yes, how do we create lifelong learners? Not particularly worrying about what they learn, but how they learn, and a love of learning. And what if we were able to think about what we're good at, and that's what we contribute to the world? When they say, some people who love their work say, I've never worked a day in my life. I just do what I love and get paid for it, right? That sounds good, right? And of course, money. I think, you come out of school, or you come out of, you start your first job, and you haven't got a clue about money. We need to teach our kids very early on what is earning, what is saving, what is investing, what is gifting, what is, right? All those things. And then the next area that I thought was very important was environmental and social understanding. So yes, we live in a family and in a community, but we also live on a planet where there will be disparity between countries, people, genders, and all of that, so that we have an awareness of social differences, and we have an awareness of what is the impact of us on the planet, and how can we best nurture our environment to ensure that it's sustainable in long term. And the final area that I added to the 7 life skills was inspired creativity. And what that means is human beings are so creative. Everyone's got such a special talent. It could be anything from singing to drawing to music to being able to cook beautifully, to be able to uplift someone and make them laugh. Do you know what I mean? Like those beautiful creative talents and to dream big, to have those dreams and those visions, because I'll bet everybody who might be today famous or in a very high position, they weren't there when they started their life, right? But they had a vision, they
Right.
had a dream, they knew that if they did the steps every single day, they would eventually get there. So yes, yes, yes. I absolutely think that to be a whole human being, we need, we need to be able to have physical, emotional, social, spiritual, all of those areas of well-being.
It is, you said it is so resonating for me personally because first I do understand that if you are healthy, your children will look at you, observe you at the early stage, and they will follow the same. Because I remember speaking with my parent once, the son did something bad of my neighbors. My parents said, okay, the apple doesn't fall away from the tree because, like the tree, it's closer to the apple, and that's how he will behave. And communication and relationship is most important because that gives value and meaning to life so much. Because you can't, the reason we have evolved living socially is because to protect each other. And it's beautiful to have such relationship and creativity. And the reason I do this thing is I believe it's a part of creativity. The process, it helped you learn so much, meet great people, learn from each other. And it's just, I said that what the steps you mentioned is like totally the way of life I believe one should live. And we're at the closing section. I have few questions left. I hope you have time.
Yes, yes.
As you look ahead, what gives you hope about the future of families and workplace?
Most recently, the Australian government has just increased its paid parental leave to 26 weeks, which is like half a year, which is great start. Like I'm going to say great start because I think, we've still got a long way to go, right? But what we know is that the first years of life are so important, and having that time with a parent, not having to worry about work, but just being focused, knowing that they will have a guaranteed income, to spend time to get that attachment with their child, to communicate with them, to connect with them. And part of that has been that 4 weeks needs to be the non-birthing parent, or the one that's not taking all the leave. And they've done it in a way that they say use it or lose it. In other words, the birthing parent can only take 22 weeks. That other 4 weeks has to be, of course, if it's a single parent family, then it's not an issue. But if there's a two-parent family, the other parent needs to take those 4 weeks. Now, normally the other parent is a dad. And what we know is the more that dads are involved, the more that dads bond with their children in those very early years. And if they're paid and supported to stay at home for a month with their baby, then that sets up the foundations for life. So that gives me hope that we are realizing as a government, as a nation, as a community, as a workplace, that the future of humanity rests on the ability of healthy, happy parents. So if we don't have healthy, happy parents, physically, mentally, emotionally, socially, we can't raise a happy, healthy future generation. So that gives me hope. It gives me hope that we're moving in the right direction.
That is more powerful, and I wish there's more power and success to you because the work you're doing, it is so impactful. I hope that globally the government implements such policies
Yeah.
because I understand that the only gap is of knowledge and understanding that the
Yeah.
father at the first month is also as important as the mother.
Absolutely. So I'm on the board of the Fathers and Families Coalition of America, which is a very amazing organization that supports fathers and families to help more fathers become involved. We absolutely know from years and years and years of research that mothers and fathers are different. They do different things. So when a child has a mother and a father, and now obviously I know that sometimes they don't because for some reason they might not, but you can have a male role model and a female role model, right? Because we know that they can help do that completion, right? So the more we can support, fathers to be involved, the better it is. These are the outcomes. Number one, better relationship with the child, better mental health for the father, and better relationship with the mother. Win, 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 win.
That's a win-win parenting. Okay. So, Dr. Rosina, let's finish with a quick rapid fire round.
Okay, I'm ready.
Great. What's one life skill every child should learn?
For me, I think the love of learning, because the love of learning is the foundation that you can learn everything. I can learn how to manage my emotions. I can learn how to eat well. I can learn how to be a kind person. I can learn how to make a difference in the world. So probably I would say be open to learning. I can learn to be resilient. Like you can learn every life skill that we need. So learning.
A great leader is someone who
A great leader who is someone who leads by example. So, in the space of working parents, if leaders are demonstrating family friendly, if they're saying, I'm going off to watch my child do a play today, or I've got trouble today, my child's sick, I'm staying home. So, you can still contact me on Zoom, but I'm not coming into the office. So, lead by example.
I love it. I love that one. Book every parent should read.
Well, I'll have to say my book. So I
I
wrote a
agree.
book I wrote a book with many experts. So it's not just me. It's actually a compiled book which has amazing. So it's called Inspired Children: How the Leading Minds Raise Their Kids. And so that's available. So I'd say that one.
And it's available on Amazon.
Yeah, it is. It's available on Amazon. It's also available on my website. So yeah.
Okay, great. Most underrated parenting skill.
I think self-care. This is the thing. If working parents take care of themselves, and this is how I explain it. If I'm happy, if I'm healthy, if I'm doing good things in the world, then I bubble over to be able to help my child, to be a good role model to my child. So the more I can take care of myself, the more I can take care of my family. So for me, self-care is the foundation. Self-fulfillment is the foundation of being a great parent.
Nice. What's more important for children,
Yeah, you
confidence or
go.
resilience?
Okay. So I think that's one where can't say one is more important than the other. It's a bit like food and water. I think we need confidence to go out into the world, to try new things, to do things. And then we need resilience to be able to pick ourselves up or to overcome obstacles or to, keep trying when we haven't succeeded the first time. So I would say both.
And one habit that has helped you personally.
My biggest habit has been reflection, self reflection. So, whether it's on an act that I've done that I might need to reflect and change, or whether it's my learning, I'd say reflection, make sure that I go inwards and really check in. Have I become the best I can be? Is there something I can do differently? It helped me with my education when I'm teaching others. And it also helps when I'm learning and growing myself. So I definitely say stopping and reflecting and then making the changes that are needed when I see there's changes that are needed.
I love that one. And one thing you wish more organizations understand about working parents.
Think the most important thing is that we can't see working parents as a group because the challenges are very different. So when you're first becoming a parent, going on parental leave and then return to work, there are certain challenges. Then when you've got preschool age children with tantrums and all sorts of things, then there's different challenges. And then you've got school age children, high school, teenagers. So the challenges never end for parents. And if you then add neurodiversity or you add illness or you add mental health challenges or you add any of those other things, so what we can see is that just managing day to day is challenging enough, but working parents really have it tough today with so many challenges that kids are experiencing that they need to help their kids overcome and they need to work. So I would say compassion and understanding of the complexities at each stage of development for a working parent. And now, I tell you, Robbie, I've been asked in the last few years to write programs, which I have, on adult children at home because more and more children are staying there. They're staying home for longer because they can't afford to leave home. They might be still studying, studies, or they're saving for a house. So now we've got another challenge. They're adults. They're in your house. How do you manage that now?
I can understand because in India we have a living with the family kind of a culture, joint family. I guess one of the biggest takeaways from this conversation is that work and family are not separate worlds. When people thrive at home, they are more likely to thrive at work also. And when organizations support people beyond their job titles, everyone benefits.
Exactly right. It's a win for families and a win for business and a win for the world.
Dr. Rosina, thank you so much for joining us today and sharing your insights and experience with us. It was an absolute pleasure to have you.
I've loved our conversation. Thank you for making it so easy to share ideas and to have this lovely conversation together.
Thank you. And thank you to everyone for listening to Corporate Elements. And Dr. Rosina, one last question. If our listeners want to reach out to you, where they can find you?
So our website is winwinparenting.com. And you can go there and you can get a free assessment, you can get a free downloadable handout, you can get a free there's so many resources there that you can use for your working parents. So please feel free to check it out. And if you'd like to work with us, one of the team at Win Win Parenting, just fill out the form.
Great. Thank you everyone for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe, share it with your network, and we'll see you in the next episode.